Hey, welcome back to the Awe Shift podcast. Today's guest is Ritu Bhasin. Now, Ritu has this interesting story of her childhood growing up, being an immigrant, like all the kind of crazy that goes with it. But also, she unpacks, in my opinion, some amazing mental framings of how you should perceive yourself and belonging, how you fit, where you fit, the idea of how identity rolls. We actually had some interesting, cool conversations about like humanity and how we show up for humanity, and also how we show up as ourselves in humanity to affect it in a positive way, to not carry on bad energy and bring things into rooms that don't belong in certain rooms. But anyways, it was a great discussion. You can tell I'm excited about it because I got to hear the heart of someone who is not only a very intelligent, very well-spoken person, but also has a heavy heart for helping humanity. And when you have those things combined, you can't help but do something great for our society and for our world. So lock into today's episode, tune in, prepare to open your hearts. And well, without further ado, let's get into the episode. Hey, welcome into the show. So we are now with our guest, Ritu, who's gonna have a cool conversation with me because we had a brief introduction, like a brief little talk when we first got on this. She's very thorough, which I do like, which means that when you have people that are very thorough, they've thought things through before they talk about them. And as you know me, my whole thing is you had better have crossed some finish lines before you teach somebody to run the race. And so I'm excited to unpack the head, the heart, and the mind of our new friend. How are you doing today, Ritu?
I'm doing great. And I love that you called me thorough. Like, if you were a member of my family, which you now are, people, thorough is one word, like annoying would be another, obnoxious would be another, anal retentive would be another. But yes,
Really?
but you know, as an entrepreneur, I don't know how the F people keep organized without being organized. It's like there's so much shit in my head at any given time. I need to be thorough. So
same. I actually created a planner for that purpose. I'm ADHD for sure. I have a good control of it at times, but I can't keep things in my head or I'll forget them or I'll stew on trying to remember them and it drives me insane. Or I just feel like there's so much I can't be fluid in my day. So I got to get it dumped off somewhere. But I'm thorough as well. I think for me, it also came from football. There's nothing's a small thing. Like for me, if I was lined up too much to the left by like a foot, it through the whole playoff, right? So these little nuances for life matter. But if you get to a rhythm of doing that, it becomes normalcy. But it's also not by accident you're successful, right? Those little things matter in the long run.
Oh, 1,000%. When I think back now to how I was as a child, I recognize that quote by Aristotle about how excellence is a practice.
Yeah.
And I think like from a young age, I learned, from a young age, I not only inherently gravitated towards this, it was drilled into me. And frankly, as a young brown girl, I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
I was meticulous with attention to detail. I was meticulous with being thorough. I was meticulous with constantly churning out excellent work on like the first or second try, which I'm sure we'll talk all about the negative impact of this on my identity formation in a moment. But it did help me to develop muscles in my mind, body, and soul that I now benefit from in terms of how I work. And excellence is a practice. I would always say that.
I agree. It's people ask me like, how do you just stay so motivated and dialed in? I have no motivation most days. Like it's not that I wake up and I'm fired up to do this. Sometimes it's just on the calendar. So that's why it has to get done. And so it's the things that matter in the long run. Now we open this podcast with one question that we usually get to, which is good fit for it now. And it's one where I want you can be as audacious as you'd like. You can be as humble as you'd like. Doesn't matter to me, but it allows me to kind of open the head and the heart of who you are. And we can progress into the conversation. Here's the question. I'm walking around town. I end up in your city. I don't know your city. We sit down at a coffee shop. I'm sitting next to you. You don't know me. I don't know you. But for some reason, you feel compelled to turn and start talking to me. In your opinion, why should I listen to you?
That is a really effing good question, Anthony. And I've been asked this question before. You should listen to me because when you will speak, I won't just be listening to what it is that you're saying, what's coming out of your mouth, but energetically, you will feel so safe and you will feel so in flow, and you will feel so good in my presence. Why? Because when I speak with you, it's almost like I'm taking you in with all of my senses, and my energy is reading your energy because I deeply, desperately want to know what makes someone's heart beat.
Mm.
Like, I often think, I've been asked before what I think my superpower is. And even before I was ever asked that question, I thought a lot about it. When I was young, I would think like, I can just like feel people's energy. And I thought that that was kind of woohoo. And then I was like, oh my God, like, what do you think you are? Like,
Mhm.
you know, like a
Yeah.
sorceress, or like what's going on? And now I'm like, no, I actually read people's energy and I absorb their energy.
Mhm.
I'm a high empath.
Yeah.
And I find that when people talk to me, they're like, oh, wow, like they feel seen. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of it is because for so long I didn't feel seen, and I want people to feel seen. And so not only do I have a really fun, energetic vibe, but you'll feel really good
Yeah.
because your energy, your system will feel like, wow,
I like it. I like that you're also
feels so good.
asking questions that I think you're like reading my mind already. I think there's two questions I want to ask. You answered them immediately. I'm like, this is amazing. We're already rolling into the conversation. So obviously the why, I get that, how it came to be. Do you find that you at some point in time started clicking in and actually like utilizing it? Because if you say as a kid growing up, I saw this and I didn't want to feel like woo woo, but I can see this. At what point in time did you start noticing like, no, this is something that's genuinely part of me? And then two, when did you start utilizing it as what's called an asset to actually have deeper conversations and make my connection, my network better?
I didn't know I was doing this. Like, I would say like into my 20s, I would say that I would be having conversations with people, and I would just really immediately be able to cut through like a lot of the shit and get right to the
Hmm.
heart of like, what's your driver? What inspires you? What are you really about? Who are you? I could do that quickly, but I didn't realize that it was a skill. And frankly, like a lot of people, when I'm good at something, I just assume everyone else is good at it. And when I'm not good at something, I assume that I'm the only one who's bad at it and
Mm.
everyone else is good
Yeah.
at it. And I would say by the time I hit my 30s, though, I started to realize, no, 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 I'm connecting with people. And also, I had started by then doing a lot more body based work and healing work, and spending a lot more time with mindfulness and meditation and being embodied. And I started to realize, no, I feel things that other people are not feeling.
Yeah.
And in the work that I was doing, it was just like very obvious. So I used to be a lawyer, and then I transitioned after a few years of practicing. I hated the practice and became an HR leader for a large international firm. I worked in the towers, and
Hmm.
I literally worked with hundreds and hundreds of people one on one in
Yeah.
that HR capacity. And I realized I'm really good with people. But
Yeah.
I would say it wasn't until I was around the age of 40 that I realized, no, this is a gift I have. I have high EQ.
Hmm.
I'm I'm an empath, and I can feel people's energy. I can read their energy. And rather than fearing it or being ashamed to name it, or be shy about it, I should actually claim it, own it, and talk about it and leverage it as much as I can. And it's not like I'm strategically in a Machiavellian way going, okay, today I'm now talking to Anthony, I am going to read his energy. It just
Yeah. No, I get you.
happens. It
Hmm.
happens. And you know, it's part of the beauty of like how I feel so blessed to have such great one-on-one relationships with people and connections with people. Like, I can't tell you how many people have said to me, like literally it happens several times a week. People will say to me, oh my goodness, I haven't told anyone this before, or I can't believe I'm sharing this with you, or
Yeah.
oh
Mm.
my goodness, I'm crying. I can't believe I'm crying. I haven't cried in years. Like, so many people cry in my midst. And I mean, I'm a big crier too. I cry all the effing time.
Yeah.
But it's that ability of like recognizing, wow, I have a gift and let me use my gift, which I think for a lot of us, we have, because of all the negative messaging we've internalized growing up, it's so hard for us to even say, I have a gift and let me use my gift and claim my gift.
Mhm.
And that in and of itself has been a gift, to be able to say, no, this is my gift and I'm using
What you
it.
do? Yeah, I like that. It's funny because as I hear these things, I've heard this a couple of times from different people. I talk to so many different amazing humans like yourself on the podcast and talk to them, and I've heard probably I would say a good 5% have the same kind of feeling. And the thing is, I hear your description of it, and maybe for the first time I go, maybe I have that because I'm the guy that'll be out in public and start talking to people I don't know, and I'll get the same thing. And I'm curious of how you get people there. Because for me, I've always done it in a way of like, I'll hear, then I'll just tell them things that most human beings wouldn't actually share because like it's either dark or it's a secret, right? And I feel like it gives them a space to share or feel like at least like they're protected in an area, like you're saying, feel safe, right? And I find it opens things up. So I have actually been able to get closer to people in like 3 days of a retreat weekend that I've known for like 3 years sometimes.
Yeah. So, I'm nodding, and what you're saying really deeply resonates with me. I'm thinking about situations where, for example, so I'm a big foodie, and if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know because I'm always posting pictures of me eating or
There you
cooking
go.
or
Like my
whatever.
wife.
And let me just say, like, I think I'm a food critic. Like, forget me being a speaker and an author, entrepreneur, all that. I'm actually a food critic. Anywho, like several years ago, I noticed that when I'd go to restaurants, it's like the food gods were on my side. Why? Because servers would bring me free food and extra wine at restaurants all the time. And I mean
Yeah.
like really nice restaurants, like places where you wouldn't expect that this would happen. It was so
Mhm.
consistently happening to me. I was like, the food gods are on my side. Like, universe knows I'm a foodie. This is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when I started to really like take a step back and think about this, what I realized is, yes, the food gods are on my side. They definitely are. I'm not confused. However,
Mhm.
what's really actually happening, I think, in those moments is that when someone comes to a table and says hi to me, I look people in the eye. I
Thought so.
physically turn to the person. Like, I'll introduce myself. I'll ask their name, and then
Mhm.
I'll have a conversation. And then we'll have a conversation. And I'm an extrovert as well. And especially if you catch me when I'm eating alone, I have a lot to say. And so
Yeah.
I'll end up having a really good conversation, and I'll learn a bit about the person. The person will learn about me. They'll realize I'm a foodie. And then suddenly the food gods are showering all kinds of gifts upon me.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good example of how I think that when we are drawn to the goodness and the light in people, and others feel this, they do the
Mhm.
same thing back. And I think
Yeah.
that, something as simple as making eye contact, or when we walk by someone on the street, and like I wrote a blog about this as part of my blogging, that
Mhm.
where when someone who asks you for something on the street or asks you for money, rather than just walking by them and ignoring them, acknowledge them. They're a person. And you can say something simply as like, I'm so sorry. I can't give you anything today, but I'm giving you blessings. Or just say, I'm so sorry. Like, acknowledge
Acknowledge
people's
the
presence,
humanity.
just recognize recognize them. And the
Yeah.
last thing I'll mention here is, before it starts to sound like I think I'm Mother Teresa, you should also know that when my light is dim and I'm filled with darkness, like when I'm a crusty batch and
Yeah.
I'm out in the world, like when I'm stressed because I'm late for something,
Yeah.
I am not emanating light. I'm emanating darkness at people, and my Uber
Yeah.
score actually can be quite low in moments.
Right.
And I have to remind myself to feel the light in myself and feel the light in others and be a good human
That's
being.
great.
So I'm not suggesting
Good
I'm Mother
human.
Teresa, because I have darkness within me too, and I can
Yeah.
be really cranky.
I get it. I'm the same way. I think that I like the way you're talking about the humanity portion because for me, I relate to my kids a big time. Like I'm real. Like for me, I never want someone to leave my presence and feel like less than. And I don't care who it is or how they operate. We're all human. Yeah, they may have have as many accomplishments as I have in life and run the business I run, but they're still a human with a soul and a heart. And so there's part of me that goes, I think we do miss out on that because I don't get free gifts at restaurants. I don't think I go to enough restaurants. But I do actually like I have converse. I want to know your name. What are you about? And I do.
Yeah.
I'm curious about these things. It's just maybe it's my humanity. And the other part of it is, yes, there are days when I'm not in a good mood. Interestingly, though, my wife has this thing where if she's having a bad mood, we all have to have bad moods. I don't know if it's a lady thing, but when I have a bad mood, like I don't want anybody else to have a bad mood because of my bad mood. So I try to give overly, like almost like more grace and I'm more patient. I get real quiet because I don't want it coming out. But I can see that. I think you can only give out what you have inside. And if you have a funky day, it's hard to have everybody else around you be in a great space of energy. So it
Well,
does make sense.
I mean, when you think about it from the perspective of emotional regulation, some of us are quite good at regulating our emotions, and others it's a journey. Like, I would say I am extremely emotional as a person. Like, the good,
Mm,
bad, and ugly
yeah.
within me comes out, and I have to remind myself to self-regulate in moments when I feel a lot of anger and rage pulse through
Yeah.
me,
Hmm.
or when I'm really, really activated. And going back to what you were sharing earlier, like this idea of, I want people to leave my presence feeling really good about who they are and not diminished.
Hmm.
But that's a practice, and that takes work. And then if I'm
Yeah.
in a cranky mood, I have to remind myself about the interconnectedness of being, that when I'm mean to the Uber driver or the checkout person at the grocery store or whoever, that person absorbs some of my negative energy and then they pass it along to the next person, or worse
Hmm.
yet, they take it home to their family.
Yeah.
And and so I remind myself of that. In fact, I remember many years ago talking to my therapist about how I felt badly that there are some moments where, despite wanting to be a good person, I could be like a crusty bitch,
Mm.
and not wanting to be like that. And she said to me, Ritu, how you treat people is a choice. And, I love this because in both my books and in all the work that I do online and blogging and all that, I talk a lot about the power of choice. Like everything that we do in life is a choice, both consciously and unconsciously. Even when we don't think we have choice, we have choice. I think about Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah. Great
Like
therapy.
we always have choice. And so I have to remind myself that even in difficult moments when I'm having a bad day, and I have a lot of bad days given all that's on my plate,
Hmm.
that even in those moments, choice is really important. And then the last thing I'll say here is that as human beings, as you may know, we're entirely ruled by our nervous systems.
Hmm.
And our nervous systems are constantly clocking for harm stimuli in the environment. They're making sure that we're safe. If when we're activated because we're stressed, our nervous systems essentially feel unsafe. It's harder to emotionally regulate in those moments when we're feeling unsafe because of stress and whatever.
Hmm.
And in those particular moments, it's even more important for us to double down on whatever practices we use to calm and settle ourselves, like
Yeah.
mindfulness, like breath work, like self coaching. And so, so, in many respects, this is a really long winded way of saying sometimes it's hard. It's hard to be a good person. Like being
Yeah.
intentional
Difficult style. Yeah.
is hard.
Hmm. I agree. I take me a lot of time. I think football helped me a little bit. Like I had good outlets. I could just go be angry. I can't do the same. I can't go hit people and not get in trouble anymore. But there was a joyous part of
So then, Anthony, how do you manage your anger? Like when you feel
now.
like waves? Yeah, what do you do?
I go work out's a good way to do it. I'll yell into a pillow. The funny thing is, for me, I rarely let things get to that point of it. It's at this point in time, I have a very good filter of what I allow to touch my energetic space enough to get me to that point. So while something can happen and it can freak me out, I could do two things. One, I'll be aware of it happening. In the moment it's happening, I go, I'm feeling this kind of rage building. I go, all right, cool. I don't want to take that on. Like you said, people take it and they take it home. I don't want to take it home. I don't want to take it to podcasts. I don't want to, right? I don't ignore it. I don't act like it doesn't exist. I just go, okay, I see what's going on. You know what? I'm aware of it. Second thing I do is go, how could I make the next moment of my life better? It's a practice, like you said. How can I make the next? So I will actively think, you know what? Is to acknowledge this, is to pay attention to it. Or to just, hey, just realize like that person doesn't know you when they cut you off. So what kind of persons get mad at a person who has no idea who's in the car? Doesn't make much logical sense, Anthony. Like, yeah, they cut you off, but like, let's press on with our day. No more road rage. So little nuances for how I can be aware of it and then actively choose what to do with it. But there are days where I'm like legitimately bothered, like I'm pissed off. It doesn't happen often. I would probably say at this point, once or twice a year, I'm in that place of like thick fury. And then I pull away from other people so I can go back to my space and kind of settle my own soul. I think whenever I go and bring it to other people, it just gets reflected back to me. And now we escalate. And I don't want to escalate it. So I can go pause, be with me, figure myself out. And I can come back to center. But I'll verbalize like, hey, I'm having a really funky day. I don't want you to have a funky day also with me. So I'm going to go just leave me alone for a couple hours. I'm going to do my thing and I'll come back. And it'll be much smoother for me. And I feel like I learned some about myself and I find it's better. But yeah, that's how I manage my crazy.
Mm-hmm. I love what you shared there because it really goes back to the underpinning of how, like, when we have more settled and resilient and coherent nervous systems, when our bodies feel more stable and like we're in flow, or we feel less threatened by whatever's being happening around us, when we're less rattled, we're better able to regulate and not end up in a place of like rage or fury, or even when we have pulses of anger. And anger is important. Like I think that it's important that we as humans feel the full spectrum of emotions, but
Yeah.
not over anchor in any of them, but to be in that place where we can pass through the angry surge. Like lately, one of the things that I have been doing is, first of all, I've been like really working hard after writing my book, We've Got This, which talks a
Mhm.
lot about the power of core wisdom. And in fact, what I'm talking about a lot here is the power of better understanding what am I saying in my mind? What's my body saying to me? How
Mhm.
can I settle my system so that I can make better decisions and I can be more of who I am and I can feel more safe. And when someone disrespects me, I feel more comfortable to speak, all of that. That's our
Yeah.
core wisdom.
Mhm.
And as I have been working harder and harder to build and grow my core wisdom, I have found that things that would have normally bothered me don't bother me as much, or better yet, I'm able to regulate better in the moment. So, for example,
Mm.
when someone cuts me off on the road, like I don't have a high amount of road rage, but there are moments where I get like pissed off.
Yeah.
And and then normally what I would do is like if I'm driving next to the person, look at them and be like, "Who are you? Let me take you in. Like, who are you being?" And then utter some negativity under my breath or in my head. Now, just yesterday I was in the car and something like this happened where the person was driving like in a less than perfect way next to me, and I
Yeah.
looked over and I felt the surge, and I was like, "Offer it to the earth, Ritu, offer it to the earth," and I did, and I was just like, "Wusa," and it's
Yeah.
gone because it's
Mhm.
not important. And I think that
Yeah.
now
Exactly.
we all ebb and flow, right? You'll have good days, you'll have bad days, and that's okay. I think the most important thing though is that we're mindful of
Mm.
like what's happening in my head, what's happening in my body, and how do I want to treat this person or this situation. And I
Yep.
think that this is what self mastery is really about, like being more intentional, recognizing that behavior is a choice. And what are we going to do in any given moment? And then the
Mhm.
next thing I'll mention to you really quickly, and then I'll stop, is
No, it's that.
here's something else that I've started doing lately more intentionally and deliberately. And I have found that it's been very helpful. I and I used to do this years ago when I started my business. So I
Mhm.
mentioned I used to be a lawyer and then I did HR for many years. When I
Yeah.
started my diversity, equity, inclusion consultancy, now 13 years ago, I had a bunch of meetings with leaders from across organizations to explain I have this new consulting firm, leadership firm, and I'd like to work with you. And before I would go into meetings, because I'd never done meetings or sales like this in this way,
Mhm.
I would actually sit down and I would write out, who am I in this meeting? Like, what's my purpose? Like, what's
Mhm.
my
Yeah.
intention in this meeting?
Mhm.
The second thing I'd write out is, who is this person? Like, what are they about in this meeting? What hat are they wearing? What's their driver or imperative in this meeting?
Mhm.
And then I write out a few things around what I wanted to have happen. And I can't tell you how powerful this exercise was. And for those of you who are in the precipice of like launching your businesses, I highly recommend doing exercises like this. I've started to do this again now when I'm going into situations. And what I've started to do is I'll say to myself, like I went to visit my sister yesterday who just got a new kitten. And I had been working all day. I was feeling really stressed. And as I'm driving there, I said to myself, probably feeling the rage as the person cut me off, by the way, I
Yeah.
said to myself, um, what intention or spirit do you want to bring into Komal's home when you walk in and you see the little kitten and you see her?
Mhm.
And I said, I want to be filled with love because I want to be at ease so that the little kitten feels good around me. And I
Yeah.
want to be in a joyful place with my sister. And when I said this, I was like, okay, so let's start doing your breath work around this and regulating around this.
Mhm.
And so that intention setting around how I'm choosing to be or I want to choose to be in situations can be really powerful and reshaping how we engage with people.
I agree. I think it also in time it becomes a nuance. Like it's actually one of the kind of early steps of navigating an identity shift, right? Because you're now in control of how you show up. Because identity is an expression in real time, right? It's you ever heard of the book Michael Singer's Untethered Soul?
Yes, of
The
course.
concept, yeah, like you kind of you have you in your head. Like this is an expression of me in real time to you, right? I'm not thinking about how I'm not self editing, but like I'm different when I'm with my kids, with my wife, or when I'm working out, right? There's different expressions, and so if I can have that take place as opposed to being out of control of that expression because somebody cut me off and I'm just letting things reel from my emotions, I can actually step in and go, how do I want to show up in this? And I got a buddy who calls it the I am process. Before he actually walks into a room, you're describing his whole thing he does, and it's called, I am happy, I am joyous, I am a light, right? Whatever you want to call it. But now what I do is I start programming my mind for who I want to be. And yeah, a few times I had to do it a couple of times. Maybe a long day at work and you come home to your wife and you're sitting in the garage or in the driveway. And before you come in, you just say, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, because you had a bad day at work. You don't want to bring it home. Well, eventually it becomes more of a flow. It's a pattern. It's an almost instinctual way you do things. You come home without having to say it every time. You become more of that. And over time, it becomes who you are. and it's a good journey. Where did you first learn and start like applying this more consistently? Because this is something I've heard before, but I always like wonder when someone tried it and put it in place and it operated and they were like, this is a thing. Because it's not a new like thing, but it's also new to a lot of people, if that makes sense.
Do you mean the being intentional in as it relates
Yeah,
to
like when
me?
you entered
How?
spaces and started being intentional. Because I'm always curious, like when, because that's an actually a step that not many people are aware of. Oddly, like it's not a new idea, but it's not one that when I talk to people, they go, "Oh, I've never heard it before." Like because many people never talk about it. But for you, where I guess where'd you hear it? Where did it become a practice of what you started putting into place, stepping in? Was it just the kitten moment, or like did it happen at some point prior?
So I first took a step back and applied this methodology when I started my business, as I mentioned, because what I found is that 13 years ago, when I started to share what I'm doing with others and having these business meetings, I felt really uncomfortable talking about myself and not knowing how to ask for what I wanted
Mm-hmm.
and not even knowing how to pitch it was that I was doing. And so taking a step back and being really thoughtful and structured, as we talked about earlier, going full circle, going into these types of discussions was really helpful. And as mentioned, like over the last little while, I have now taken this into being really deliberate and mindful in any interaction. But I think in particular, it's really important that we do this when we're not already in flow. And so, for example, in this moment, as you and I are speaking, I feel really good. I feel really relaxed. I'm just doing me and being me. In the next discussion I'll go into, my energy will be the same. Why? Because it's been set now by this hour that we'll have together. But there are moments where we go from meeting to meeting to meeting and we're not in flow. We're not connecting to our minds and bodies. In fact, if anything, we're either frozen because we're numb, we're that stressed, activated,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
or we're like just feeling anxiety and we're just moving, moving, moving. It's in those moments in particular where it can be really helpful to just take a step back and say,
Mm-hmm.
what type of energy do I want to emit into the universe in this discussion or with this person? And in fact, I remember watching Jill Bronte Taylor, who wrote My Stroke of Insight on Oprah Winfrey, her show many years ago. And uh, Jill talked about a very severe injury she had had. And I think she's a neuroscientist or a neuroscientist, I believe. Now, I probably am misstating her position, but the point is, she knew how the brain worked. And for her in particular, she had this experience where, because of this brain injury, had a fascinating experience with learning how to reuse her brain. And what she said is that she became very heightened to she developed a heightened sensitivity to energy
Mm-hmm.
immediately after the injury. And when people would walk into the room, she would be able to feel their energy, and it had a profound impact on her and her sense of the moment. And she said what she learned several things from this experience. And but one of the things that it helped her to really focus on is being responsible for the energy we bring into a room. And
Mm.
I think about that often. And it goes back to it goes back to what we're talking about here. Like,
Yeah.
how do I want to leave the Uber driver? How do I want to leave the little kitten? How do I want to leave you? How do I want to leave the people who are tuning in today? It's the be responsible for the energy we bring into the room. And so I think a lot about this in terms of how of my interactions. It also reminds me of an aw shucks moment that I had several years ago about how when we're not intentional, what can happen to our identities.
Mm-hmm. So I like the way you're flowing with this because I think part of it for me is like listen to where it all flows. I think what's cool is I can hear and understand why the book is the book, right? It's the unlocking aspect of belonging, right? If you're intentional about the energy into a room, it's because of the people in the room you care about, the Uber driver you care about to an extent, the humans that are in, like the idea that you should give grace to the people that they're just people, whether or not they've done a whole bunch of stuff, and then we're having a discussion on how we're impacting these people with just being right. So I love it's a good transition, I think, to talk about more of the book, like that we've got this book, the Unlock the Beauty of Belonging. Where did this book become, I guess, a seed that had to grow into a book?
So many years ago, I wrote my first book. It's called The Authenticity Principle, which is all about how do you claim who you are? How do you be more of who you are, especially when you feel relentless pressure to conform and to mask your identities.
Mhm.
And it really stems from my childhood experiences with struggling with authenticity and belonging. And in particular, I am the child of Indian immigrant parents who came to Canada now over 50 years ago. I had a
Mhm.
front row seat to watching my parents struggle with racism and other systems of inequities in
Mhm.
trying to build a beautiful life for our family. I had my own experiences with relentless bullying and relentless racist childhood bullying in particular that frankly really hurt my soul. And I ended up having deep trauma because of these experiences. And now, several decades later, extensive therapy to help me heal from those really horrible things that happened to me.
Mhm.
And by the time I was in my 20s, I had created a curated life for myself as it related to my identities. And in particular, I had come to a place where, because of constantly changing who I am and morphing aspects of my identity, I was lost. I didn't know who I was anymore. And so, because I constantly had negative messaging coming my way about being brown, about being a woman, about being a smart girl growing up, I had basically curated these personas or these images of who I should be if I was with my family, if I was with family friends or relatives, if I was in the law firm environment, if I was in the business community, if I was on a dance floor on a Saturday night, if I was meeting husband options, and so candidates. And I had put up, I had become so used to what I call performing. And when I say performing, I don't mean like high performance. I mean like
Mhm.
life is a stage and I'm an actor on a stage putting up this curated image.
Yeah.
I no longer knew who I was.
Mhm.
And so by the time I hit my early 30s, if you had said to me, "Who is your authentic self?" I would have said to you, "I actually don't even know who I am anymore."
Mm.
And several things happened in my life that ultimately led me to a place where I decided that going forward, I was going to live as authentic a life as possible, which is part of
Yeah.
why I left the legal profession and started my own business many years ago.
Mhm.
And so for me, learning to live more authentically was step one. But the second step was for me to deeply understand the woundedness I have held inside of me since I was a child, the trauma that related to my identities, and heal from those negative experiences so that I could claim my belonging. And so, writing my new book, We've Got This, Unlocking the Beauty of Belonging, is not only my gift to the world about what I have learned about how do we actually stand in our power, be who we are, and claim our belonging with ourselves and with others. It also has been, frankly, one of the most healing things I have ever done for myself by all the work and research I've done in this space for many, many years now. Putting it into one book to help others has actually, in the end, profoundly helped me to be in a place where I can better claim belonging and be who I am and stand in my power. And it's been such a beautiful journey.
I like that. That's good. I mean, it's good reasoning behind all of it. I think the best books are the ones that we feel compelled to write for whatever reason. I think it's I like the base of where it came from, right? So, who's the best person to pick up this book and read this, right? If it's, I'm assuming it's not for all humanity, but it is, so to speak. But you might have been thinking of somebody or some individual type of soul or experience as you're writing the book.
So, first of all, I define belonging as the profound feeling we hold inside ourselves of being honored and accepted for who we are.
Okay.
And in order to belong, we first must belong to ourselves. We must honor and accept who we are with for ourselves before we can claim belonging with others. And from that perspective, and based on what we know about human beings, belonging is an innate human need. It's part
Yeah.
of our instinctive need as humans to be seen,
Mm.
to be respected and valued by others. So, really, my book is for anyone out there
Yeah.
who has ever struggled to be honored and accepted for who they are. And in particular, if you have struggled with your own identity because of the negative messaging coming your way that you're not good enough, or you're too loud, or you're not loud enough, or you shouldn't love that person, or you're too brown, or you're too this or that, or whatever messaging that came your way that has caused you to feel like you're not good enough. And now you feel untethered. Speaking of untethering, untethered to your identity and your soul.
Mhm.
My book is for you. And really, when you take a step back and think about this, Anthony, so many of us, all of us, question mark, have struggled to belong in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
That said, I would say that there are many of us for whom life is even harder. And in fact, I often will say, hate makes a hard life even harder. And many of us come from cultural communities where just by virtue of our identities, we experience a lot of hate and hurtful things.
Yeah.
And it's unfair, it's unjust. And the thing that upsets me the most is it strikes at our ability to belong. And so in particular, we've got this is for you.
I like that. I think at some point in time for people, they've all had that feeling, right? You haven't felt like you belong. And it's interesting. I think there's also, in my opinion, a reason people don't elevate to the next tier because of this desire to be in the tribe or to belong so much. So when I say elevate, if I'm in a group of people and we're not the greatest, or maybe I'm like, I want to do better than this group. I believe with the five, they say the average of the five people you surround yourself with. I think it's the average of the expectations of those five. So their expectations are low, and I want to do higher things. I find it's hard to elevate out of the group because I'm leaving something. I'm leaving the belonging. I'm leaving that space, even though it's the only way to really climb into a new group. I can't be in two groups at the same time. It'd be incongruent for a person for a long period of time to be in this group of amazing high achievers, but also hang out with these guys that are just hanging out doing drugs all day. Like, it's not going to be for a long period of time the way you operate. And so that belonging keeps us in a good place when you're in a good place, we're good humans. But then sometimes a fear of not belonging keeps us in a bad place. You read that experience?
Oh, Anthony, you're speaking to my soul right now. I had an experience just last year, interestingly, as I was writing my book. I had a really fascinating experience with a friend group whom I really deeply loved and cared for, having some darkness unfold in that friend's circle, where ultimately I'm no longer part of that friend's circle. And what I realized in the thick of writing my book and on belonging and being in a place where I'm speaking and researching and writing about belonging is that, and I'm in my late 40s now as a grown ass woman who thought she left a lot of her childhood stuff behind, or had healed from a lot of it, realized that my deep, deep, deep woundedness around being unworthy and not lovable had caused me to be part of experiences and have relationships that actually I still wasn't feeling belonging in. And I still wasn't getting to be who I am, even in the midst of writing a book on belonging and being as old as I now am, haha. And it was just such an eye-opening experience for me, and realizing that, wow, for a lot of us, this journey is not one where it's like, okay, I just do ABC and I will be done and over, and then I will stand in my power and claim my belonging for a lifetime and it will be all done. My belonging problem is solved.
Mm-hmm.
No, for a lot of us, this journey is a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
And that there will be many times over the next several decades for me where I will have moments of being like, I'm still healing, I'm still doing my work, and I'm still not experiencing belonging in this moment. And in fact, let me just say, like, I'm a professional speaker. I work with senior leadership audiences around the world. I often am in boardrooms where, as a woman of color from an immigrant family upbringing, minority religion, someone whose family was really working class growing up, I'm surrounded by people who do not look like me, are way fancier than what I grew up as. And there's a lot of elitism and conservatism in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I walk into these rooms and I feel nervous system activation. Like, I feel my childhood stuff trigger. And I have to regulate and anchor and do all the stuff that I've talked to you about, from breath work to self-coaching to being really mindful, all of that, to settle myself in these situations. And that is because of childhood experiences of not feeling belonging. But even as an adult, I still have the woundedness in me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I'm doing my healing work, so I'm less rattled and I can feel good. And frankly, unlike Ritu at the age of 20, where I would shut down and self-silence and I wouldn't speak in these moments, I can use my self-coaching and my scripting and all the tools that I talk about, and we've got this, to actually speak, stand in my power, and then be like, I'm offering all this negativity to the earth because I'm amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to speak and do me and be me. And you frankly should listen to my voice because you're paying me a lot to speak anyhow. And as I'm speaking, you're realizing, I can see your jaws are dropping because you're stunned by how smart I really am, because your biases were causing you to think that I was going to be fluffy.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're listening and you're actually quite amazed by what I'm saying and you're learning.
Yeah.
So from releasing relationships that weren't serving to opening up space to invite in new amazing energy into my life where I can and am claiming belonging, to claiming my belonging in boardrooms that are filled with homogeneity. For many of us, belonging will be a constant theme in how it is that we navigate our lives. And it will be both beautiful and it will be hard, but it will be worth it.
I agree. I can attest to the exact same thing. I don't look like most of the people in the boardrooms, and I go consult for Amazons and the PayPals of the world. And so I walk in these rooms. Yeah, definitely. It's like, and you can, those who know who you are, like, they get it. But those who don't, like, I now have to go this mental hurdle of like, how do I make sure I am presenting myself in a way this person accepts me? And you think about it, but then I go, I don't got to think about that. I just got to do me, and it'll take care of itself, right? But you have to actively shift your mind to that. And I do think it's a trigger. Like, you'll walk through, I gotta put my suit on of this is who I am. I'm the best version of me. But then I go, no, I'm always the best version of me. I'm just going to do what I do. And I find that when you get into that pocket, you actually make the impact you desire to make. The one you were worried about not making, you'll make it when you just do what you're doing. When you start thinking about, how do I present then you're starting to be something different identity wise. And now you present something that's not as refined. You don't have as much control over, and people can poke the holes and see the holes in it. So you're less of the impactful person you could be. So I do think that this is a really good concept to think through, because I think we all have these aspects, whether it can also be vice versa. There's definitely people that walk into rooms and situations that are complete opposite in terms of what they experience. And I think it's a thought for us to hopefully put on people's hearts and expand upon when those moments happen for them, of how they can approach them.
Yeah. And let's go back to what we were talking about earlier. If in any given moment you find yourself, for those joining us today, in a situation where you're about to walk into a room or you've just entered into the room and you feel that activation because you're like, oh my heavens, I'm being triggered. There's a lot of homogeneity in the room, or I'm in the room with people who I know always talk over me, or I've been in rooms like this before where I felt disrespected, and you can feel the shutdown starting. It's in these moments in particular, being really intentional about how you're choosing to behave and settle yourself become even more important. And so when I have this happen, for example, I will say to myself, either before I walk into a room because I'm anticipating it, or the second I get there, Ritu Bhasin, stand in your power. And I'm a big believer in affirmations coupled with settling the body through body work like the breath, like taking very calm, deep breaths, being really mindful and intentional in those moments, to say to myself, Ritu Bhasin, stand in your power. Ritu Bhasin, you've got this. Ritu Bhasin, you are smart. You are worthy. And actually, you're the expert. They've hired you. You're the expert.
Yeah.
And all you need to do is just be you. And so it's so important that we leverage these types of tools, especially in moments where we feel the shutdown happening. Why? So that, number one, we can shine. But number two, this is exactly what claiming our belonging is about. And by the way, if you want to learn more about how to make this happen, I talk a lot more about it in the book, or if you check me out online. I have a lot of resources for those listening who are like, but how do I actually make this happen? You can check those things out.
Great. Well, that's a perfect lead in the last two questions we have as we depart from our time that goes so fast when it's so fun. First question is, where can I send people to get the book and more of you?
Well, thank you, Anthony. This was a perfect segue. So first of all, the book is available at all the places you buy books online, so you can check that out. And to get more of me directly, please go to ritubhasin.com. And my first name, it's Ritu, R-I-T-U, last name Bhasin, B-H-A-S-I-N, ritubhasin.com. And connect in with me on Instagram in particular. I love getting DMs, and LinkedIn.
Awesome. I love it. Second question, which is the last question. What promise did God or the Creator make to the world when they created you?
Anthony, boo, mind blown with that question. The greatest, the highest, the divine. Oh, I'm going to cry. Put me here to talk about how beautiful the journey of claiming our belonging is, because I am living proof of what it can look like when we struggle deeply as it relates to feeling broken and unworthy and not good enough in who we are, and being able to turn multiple pages to finally feel beautiful in our own skin and recognize that not only was there nothing wrong with me, but the system around me was broken because it taught me to hate myself. And no, in fact, I am beautiful. And so I am the messenger of this really important life takeaway, that when you claim belonging for yourself, it will open up the door for you to claim belonging with others, and you will feel beautiful in your life doing this.
I love it. That's an awesome answer. It's funny as you concluded with beautiful, and I was in my head thinking, what a beautiful statement. So thank you for being you, for showing up how you do. The world needs many more of you, and so I'm glad to see that a person with your heart and your experience is leading this charge. So again, thank you for spending some time with me. I seriously, genuinely appreciated our conversation. It's always fun to hop on and meet people like yourself the first time. It's like, let it flow. It always works out smoothly. Yeah, thank you for tuning in as well, for hanging out with us. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to come hang out with us here. Make sure to go get the book, as well as go and see her on her website and tap in, send her a DM. She likes those. You can find all the show notes and everything below that has all the links you need. Outside of that, as always, make the most of your awe shift moments so you can make shift happen. It's Anthony Trucks and Ritu Bhasin signing off. Hey, thank you for tuning into the Awe Shift podcast. I pray that we gave something amazing to your life. And if you found this episode served you in some way, I would love if you could share it with people you know, people you love, as well as your community, because you never know who needs that simple little seed that can grow into something amazing for their life. And the actual training doesn't stop here. If you want your free copy of the show notes sent to you after every episode so you can get the major points consolidated down, simply go to textanthony.com and message the word notes. Till next time, make shift happen.